Let's talk about running backs that you should start or sit in week 8 of the fantasy football season. We have so many teams on bye. It's bye-mageddon, the first one of 2025. The Cardinals, Lions, Jags, Raiders, Rams, Seahawks, which means you will have no Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, Travis Etienne, Ashton Jeanty, Kyron Williams, Ken Walker, Zach Charbonnet. But don't worry, I'm going to go through all 13 matchups in today's video. So even though it's a difficult week, you'll have my rankings for every running back, and I'll help you hopefully set your lineups. Last thing, I will guarantee a reply to the first 3 comments of every video this year, so make sure you're subscribed and you turn your notifications on. Let's jump into Thursday night football, where we have the Vikings at the Chargers. It's a 43.5 point over under. The Chargers are favored by 2.5 points. Very close spread. My anticipation at the time of recording this is that we will have no Aaron Jones. So I am ranking Jordan Mason as my RB18 this week. And with so many players on bye, so many players injured, he is going to be in that must-start category. Now, he's had a really safe floor. He's had a couple really bad matchups, anywhere from 10 to 12 PPR points in the last couple weeks. So we can go out there and play him against the Chargers, who are middle of the pack against running backs. Obviously, it'll be interesting to see JJ McCarthy whenever he steps into this offense and how that will impact the flow of the offense. But look, if Aaron Jones is active, it gets a lot more messy, because I do see this as a 1A, 1B situation. Think, Charbonnet, Walker, Marks, Chubb. I think that's how the rotation will look. Obviously, Aaron Jones will be more attractive because of his PPR upside, but I don't anticipate him coming back. They'll both be spot starts if he is back. It is a short week, so I think they'd probably hold him off until next week if I had to guess. On the opposite side of the ball, we are going to go ahead and go with Hassan Haskins as a must start. Again, so many players are unavailable in your lineups this week. So when you have a guy who is touching the ball as many times as Vidal is each and every week, it's hard to not put that guy into your lineup right now. Last week, he had 49 snaps compared to 25 for Hassan Haskins. He touched the ball just 13 times, but unfortunately, this team was down for the majority of the game, so they never really had a chance to establish the run. But Hassan Haskins, the guy behind him, only had 3 touches. This is Vidal's backfield until they make a trade, which I don't think that happens this week, or Marion Hampton comes back. So we're going to start Vidal with some confidence, even though it's a relatively difficult defense to go up against. Okay. No international game this week, thank God. I mean, shout out to our international people. We want the game to spread, but I'm glad we don't have to think about that. Start of the 1 p.m. Sunday slate of games, Dolphins at the Falcons. Devon Achane, of course, a must start. One of the better picks in fantasy football this year, has been so reliant, is not only the wide receiver one in Miami, but also the RB one, right? So it's that dual threat ability, if you will. I am shocked that this team has not already fired their head coach. I thought McDaniel would be out of there by this time this week, but he's not. And also, Tua Tagovailoa will remain the starting quarterback. So as long as the head coach is in place and Tua is in place, you need not worry about Devon Achane. I would slightly worry if there are changes. What will the new play caller think about Devon Achane and how to deploy him? But we don't have to think about that right now. Here's where things are interesting. On the opposite side of the ball here, of course, you're going to start Bijan Robinson, right? It's a top 5 matchup for your fantasy running backs. The Dolphins are giving up more rushing yards per game than any other defense in the NFL. Their rushing defense is terrible. Bijan's my RB1 this week. But beyond Bijan Robinson, I think you can start Tyler Algier. I see a very realistic possibility in this game where the Falcons are favored by 7.5 points, huge favorites coming in. I see a very realistic possibility where in the second half, the third and fourth quarter, you're seeing a lot of Tyler Algier. I wouldn't be shocked if this is one of those games where he has a touchdown, averages over 6 yards per game, 12 touches. So with limited options this week, Tyler Algier is a legit flex if you're in a difficult position. All right, let's jump to the Bears at the Ravens. One of the higher over-unders of the week, 49.5 points. Now, obviously, for the Ravens, we are anticipating Lamar Jackson being back with this team. That's a huge boost to Derrick Henry. Both of these running backs for these teams are must starts, DeAndre Swift and Derrick Henry. They have great matchups on opposite sides. The Bears give up the 6th most points to fantasy running backs. The Ravens give up the 2nd most points to fantasy running backs. Now, here's what I would say. Some of these numbers for Baltimore is just their defense is really bad. And some of it is no Lamar Jackson means their offense isn't on the field very much and they're constantly being scored on, right? Regardless, DeAndre Swift has been one of the better running backs in fantasy football since their bye week. We all thought, oh, maybe Kyle Monangai will come in and take over. Well, last week, Kyle Monangai clearly had a role, but they were up in that game, and there wasn't a single moment where it was really in doubt versus the Saints. You can see last week, DeAndre Swift had 19 carries and 20 total opportunities. Kyle Monangai had 15 total opportunities. Now, we could see a change of the guard here where Ben Johnson, who loves to deploy multiple running backs, maybe that will be a theme over the next couple weeks. My feeling is DeAndre Swift has been playing so well. I think this is more just an indication of the game script. And at this point, Swift is still the only guy that you can start. It's a great matchup. He should smash. I wouldn't be shocked if Kyle Monangai ends up being, a decent floor play given the matchup. And I do expect Derrick Henry to be back and in full strength. So if you're a Derrick Henry owner, if you're not, go try and trade for him. It's the perfect time, by the way, with his upcoming schedule. But if you're a Derrick Henry owner, start him with confidence this week. With Lamar Jackson back and healthy, this offense should look much better. He should have plenty of goal line opportunities. I think he's a big bounce back this week. Okay, let's go to the Bills at the Panthers. 47.5 over under, very high over under. The Bills are heavy favorites, 7.5 points. James Cook is going to be a must start. Obviously, his first bust week before the Bills bye, but you're going to play him regardless. It doesn't matter what happens to this offense. Each and every week, James Cook is going to be in your lineup. Now, on the opposite side of the ball, the Panthers offense will look a little bit different this week. Firstly, Bryce Young suffered a high ankle sprain. I don't think that really impacts this running back room at all. Now, if you were curious, guys, okay, what we saw last week where they pretty much split the opportunities for the Panthers down the middle, are we going to see that? Or is that just, is Chuba going to get more work coming from, back from this injury? Are they going to give it to Rico because he looks so great? Well, Canales came out after the game and said, yeah, we're going to continue to use both of them, right? Now, there's a glass half full and glass half empty way to look at this. Half full, they're both going to get used, but this offense is built around the run game, right? I mean, very rarely are you seeing any wide receiver getting a heavy amount of targets and a high amount of yards in this offense anymore. Last week, for example, Chuba Hubbard touched the ball 16 times. Rico Dowdle touched the ball 18 times. So if this team is going to be built around the running backs and both of them are going to get 15 plus touches per game, they'll both be startable assets. Now, here's the great news for them as well. They are playing the Buffalo Bills. They are one of the worst rush defenses in the NFL. That's the 7th best matchup for your fantasy running back, by the way. So both are going to be must starts for me. I prefer Rico, but Chuba is the starter. There's a reason he's a captain. There's a reason that they signed him to a long-term deal. If you're a Rico owner, Chuba's not going away. If you're a Chuba owner, Rico is not going away. They're both going to be an important part of this offense, but it's built around the run game, this entire offense, and it's a great matchup. So both are guys that you can start this week. Okay, let's go to the Jets at the Bengals. 44.5 over under. Bengals are favored by 4.5 points. The Jets haven't won a game. I don't think that changes this week. But Breece Hall, if you're looking for a glass half full, is supposedly good to go. This is from Aaron Glenn. He said he got banged up a little bit, but he should be fine for Cincinnati. Thank God, because this is the best matchup for your fantasy running backs. No defense in the NFL gives up more fantasy points per game than the Cincinnati Bengals. So I do think this week, Breece Hall, you can start. And honestly, I don't care if it's Justin Fields. I don't care if it's Tyrod Taylor. That's not really going to impact things. Regardless, Breece Hall is going to have a great day, in my opinion. On the opposite side of the ball, I do think Chase Brown is becoming a more startable name. What's happening with the Bengals offense is because Joe Flacco is competent and he's able to get the ball out quick and make some smart decisions, that is actually, and which is what we need to see happen with the Commanders, that is actually causing less stacked boxes, and it's giving Chase Brown more room to run, right? You love to see that for Chase Brown, who last week had 11 carries, 108 yards, had 12 fantasy points. He's been in that spot start range for me pretty much the majority of the year. He's going to stay in that range right now. He's my RB26, so a playable name. Certainly doesn't have the same upside that you drafted him to have, but still a safe floor play. Okay, let's go to the 49ers at the Texans. Lower over under in this one at 42.5 points. The Texans are favored by 1.5 points. I think that line is going to move closer and closer to the Niners. The Niners will be favorites by the time that game actually begins. Let's not waste our time on the Christian McCaffrey side of this. You're going to start Christian McCaffrey every week that he's available. You're going to put him in there. It's the San Francisco 49ers. No, it's the San Francisco CMCers. All right. That is the entire identity of this offense is Christian McCaffrey, RB1, wide receiver 1. Now, as far as the Houston Texans go, look, it's no secret. They looked terrible on Monday night. Their offensive line, I would say, is probably the worst offensive line, not just this year. This offensive line unit might be the worst offensive line we've seen in football in the last 5 years. It's terrible. Every single play, there is one guy who's just getting thrown to the side, and they're all like, it doesn't matter if it's Chubb or Woody Marks. Both of them are getting contacted at negative yards in the backfield. Really frustrating. Last week, however, we told you we prefer Woody over Chubb. Before their bye week, he played the vast majority of the snaps. Well, it was pretty close, but he had, the little bit of the go-ahead. And as we said last week, in games where you predict the Texans to be down, you'll want to play Woody Marks. That's what I predict again here against the 49ers. I think the Texans will be down, needing to come back, and Woody Marks will be the featured running back, in my opinion. They're both playable, but Woody is the one that's going to get the high volume touches, the high value touches like the catches through the air. Here in week 7, where they were down the entire game, you can see Woody Marks played 48 snaps compared to 19 for Chubb. He had the majority of the early down work. All of the goal line and the short yardage work as well went to Woody Marks. And in the 2-minute drill, he got the vast majority of the work as well. So I think Woody Marks is their guy. Again, in games where they're down, most games I think they're probably going to be down. And that's obviously beneficial for a name like Woody Marks. In this last game on Monday Night Football, Marks had 15 touches, including 5 targets. Chubb had 8. And on those 8 touches, he had 11 yards. So Nick Chubb, I think, is a sit for most of you guys. But because there are so many injuries, I just wanted to give him as an option here versus the 49ers, who are actually a top 12 matchup for your fantasy running back. So again, we prefer Marks, but I understand if you don't want to play either of them. Okay, let's go to the Browns at the Patriots. One of the lowest over-under of the week. And the Patriots are heavy favorites in this game by about 7 points, a full touchdown. Ramondre Stevenson. Look, we've all been saying, I feel like you guys watching this have probably agreed, for the past 5 weeks, we've all been like, look, at some point, TreVeyon Henderson is going to get more and more involved. At some point, right? Then Antonio Gibson goes down with an injury, and then it was like, surely they have to use TreVeyon Henderson. No, they don't. And in fact, TreVeyon Henderson is on your bench until further notice. Until we see some sort of life, yes, there's going to be reports where they say, oh, we want to utilize TreVeyon Henderson. Yeah, and then you're going to go out and do things like get Terrell Jennings, the guy who was working at your local Costco, your local Kroger's just 2 weeks ago. He got more rushing attempts than TreVeyon Henderson, your top 40 NFL draft pick, your second-round draft pick, right? So at this point, we have no trust with this coaching staff outside of they have an absolute obsession, a fetish for Ramondre Stevenson. So no matter what happens, Ramondre Stevenson is the guy until further notice. He had 20 touches this last game versus the Saints. Obviously got into the end zone, 17 PPR points, 16.8, but we're rounding up there. So you can start Stevenson if you're going to start anyone out of that backfield. But I will say the reason I'm not high on him and the reason he's not a must start is because it's a terrible matchup against the Browns. The Browns give up the fewest yards per game on the ground to any team. So I'm only telling you that you can play him because of volume alone. On the opposite side of the ball, of course, you're going to start Quinshon Judkins. Since he was allowed to come back to football, right, week 2 onwards, he's been one of the better, most consistent plays at the running back position. So, of course, you're going to put him in there. The entire offense funnels around him. Okay, let's go to a divisional game. Giants at Eagles. 43.5 point over under. The Eagles are favored by 7 points. Now, I know just 2 weeks ago we saw the Giants win, but this is in Philadelphia and it's different. All right. It's just different when you're a rookie quarterback on the road in division. I do think we will see the Giants struggle a little bit more. But what's great for Cam Skattebo is even with Tyrone Tracy back and healthy, what we wanted to see is it still to be Cam Skattebo's backfield. And it is 100%. It is. Cam Skattebo last week had 46 snaps compared to 28 for Tracy, and he had 21 total touches compared to just 9 for Tracy. Obviously, Tracy got into the end zone on that broken play, but Skattebo is getting not only volume on the ground, but volume in the air. Cam Skattebo is like what you would dream Woody Marks to be, right? In a competent offense with a competent play caller, that's what you would hope Woody Marks to be. Skattebo is that, and I just mean for fantasy football. Play style, they're very different, right? Skattebo is like the Kool-Aid man. He's going to run through the wall for you. But obviously, Skattebo is a must-start each and every week. And oddly enough, the Eagles are a good defense, but they've been terrible against running backs this year. They give up the 8th most points. So you can definitely start him. And I understand it's been disappointing for Saquon Barkley. There's no doubt about it. Like, Saquon has been disappointing. He has been one of the more disappointing first-round picks in fantasy this year. Just the RB14 through 7 weeks. The past 2 weeks alone, under 9 PPR points in both of those games. But this is a team that likes to get right for their guys. You know, I think they'll do that with Saquon against his Giants. I am going to play him no matter what. Guys, news is constantly changing in the NFL. If you want my latest rankings for both weekly and rest of season, then become a season pass member, but make sure you use the promo code LAND at signup. When you do, it'll be a $34 one-time purchase. You get some vouchers to come on the live stream and ask me questions about your fantasy team. You get all the latest rankings, all the premium tools like the trade calculator, and of course, you're supporting the show here, keeping the lights on. Check that out in the pinned comment. Okay, let's go to the start of the afternoon slate of games. We've got the Bucks at the Saints. 47.5 point over under, so a pretty high over under, but the Bucks are favored by 6.5 points. Rachaad White coming off a stinker on Monday Night Football. They were down that entire game. And let's be real, the Bucks could not establish the run at any point against Detroit. That Detroit defensive line looked better than ever. But still, without Woody Marks, Rachaad White is the guy, 63 snaps out of 69. Sean Tucker was completely invisible. So Rachaad White is game script proof. However, in this game versus the Saints, he should be a major factor. This team should be up. They should be able to establish the run. Look, obviously, if Bucky Irving is active, then I will sing the praises of the fantasy gods myself. I will send out my thanks to the fantasy gods above because I would need him in my lineups, and he would obviously be a must start when he's back. But I would argue in this matchup against the Saints, even if Bucky Irving is out there, you can still start Rachaad White in this specific matchup where the Bucks are such heavy favorites. They're going to come out after an embarrassing performance and look to spank the Saints. Also, you have to keep in mind, no Mike Evans, right, for the vast majority of the year right now. So a lot of the passing attack, they're probably going to invent ways to get both Rachaad White and Bucky Irving involved through the air. But my gut tells me Bucky won't play this week. So Rachaad is a start. On the opposite side of the ball, look, it's an interesting situation in New Orleans because what we were all really worried about for Alvin Kamara was Kendre Miller's usage. We were starting to see Kendre Miller, and he was starting to become a really important part of that rushing attack. Obviously, if you don't know, Kendre Miller tore his ACL, so he'll be out for the remainder of the season. Now, you have to ask the question, well, if Kendre Miller is out, are they going to trust Devin Neal the same way they trusted Kendre Miller? Well, in this game last week, the answer is no. They only gave Devin Neal one single carry. He was only out there for 7 snaps. Alvin Kamara was back up there, a high usage player, 47 snaps out of 56, just dominating from the perspective of like being out there and available. He had 84% of the snaps, his second highest mark this entire season. So that's like glass half full. Well, they probably don't trust Devin Neal the way they trusted Kendre Miller. They're probably going to be down in this game. It's going to be Kamara. With the targets, he's a safe floor. But I'll be honest, this offense is so bad. And, you know, in Kellen Moore's offense, they're not looking to target Alvin Kamara. Even though he's one of the best pass-catching running backs in NFL history, they're not looking to feature him that way. So it's really frustrating. And even when they're on the goal line, there's a chance that Taysom Hill, they do some buggery and, you know, he gets into the end zone. So the reason Alvin Kamara is not a must start, but rather a spot start, is simply because the upside is so low compared to recent years. It really has fallen off a cliff. Also, you have to keep in mind that Eric McCoy, their best, I would say probably their best lineman, is going to be out for a significant period of time. It actually is for the season, right? Torn biceps. So, man, I'll be honest. If you're a Kamara guy, you can say, well, he's going to be on the field often now. Maybe that's the case. But there's still such limited upside in this offense, unfortunately. Okay, let's go to the Cowboys at the Broncos. 48.5 point over under. There should be a lot of fantasy points in this one. The Broncos are favored by 3 points. Javonte Williams, a must start. I don't really care what the matchup is for Javonte Williams. Every single week, he's out there and he's playing for me. They could play the Cleveland Browns every week, who give up the fewest amount of rushing yards per game. And every week I would tell you Javonte Williams is a must start. At some point, elite offenses, they beat whatever defense they go up against. And that is what we have with the Dallas Cowboys. There will be so many red zone opportunities, so many big play opportunities. It's a great offensive line. Even against a great Broncos defense in Denver, you're going to play Javonte Williams. On the opposite side of the ball, It's a great matchup for J.K. Dobbins. My RB15 on the week. The Cowboys give up the third most points to fantasy running backs. So he should have a great opportunity here in this matchup to get right. Last week, he had most of the touches, but only scored 9 fantasy points. The Giants were much more competitive than we anticipated. RJ Harvey, the problem with him, I've labeled him a risky start. It is a good matchup, but the problem with RJ Harvey is Tyler Bidet is still a problem. And when it's not Tyler Bidet, it could be any other backup running back that Sean Payton decides that he likes this week, right? So it's just hard because there might be room for multiple running backs to be successful in this offense, but not when Sean Payton deploys 3 every single week. Okay, let's go to Titans at Colts. I don't really know how you trust any Tennessee Titans running back at this point. This is back-to-back weeks where their usage is pretty much split. Here in week 7, Tony Pollard had 30 snaps, 23 for Tajay Spears, but Tajay had 9 opportunities and Pollard had 12 opportunities. So when you've got 2 guys in one of the worst offenses in the NFL in a negative matchup, the Colts are not a good matchup for your running backs. In an offense that rarely scores points, that's rarely in the red zone, it's just, there's not much value. So both of these guys I'm labeling risky starts, meaning the vast majority of you guys, 9 out of 10 of you, have a much better play than Tony Pollard or Tajay Spears. But if you have to throw them out there, I get why you would want to do that. I just would prefer to avoid it. On the opposite side of the ball, of course, Jonathan Taylor, he should smash again. I mean, the 4th best matchup for running backs against the tight ends. It's in Indianapolis. The Colts are favored by over 2 touchdowns. The biggest favorites of the week. I'd be shocked if JT isn't a top 5 running back again this week. Okay, let's go to Sunday Night Football. We've got the Packers at the Steelers. 44.5 point over under. The Packers are favored by 3 points. Should be a competitive game. Josh Jacobs is going to be a must start. Obviously, we weren't sure if he was going to play last week with the calf injury. That's probably still going to be a part of his practice reports this week. But if he played last week, you would anticipate him playing this week. On to the Steelers, though. There was a concerning trend for a couple of weeks where you were starting to see Kenneth Gainwell and Jaylen Warren start to really split opportunities down the middle. That did not happen on Thursday Night Football last week. Kenneth Gainwell, just 5 total touches. Meanwhile, Jaylen Warren, a dominant 20 opportunities, and he looked fantastic. Of course, he played the Bengals, so how much can you really pull from that? But almost 20 fantasy points, 127 rushing yards on 16 rushing attempts. Obviously, always a threat through the air. So he's going to be a must start. It's a bad matchup, but as long as we have workhorse Jaylen Warren, then Jaylen Warren is in your lineup. Before we get into Monday Night Football, I want to tell you guys about 6 players I have the ultimate confidence in for week number 8. I've created a DFS lineup with them. We're talking Cortland Sutton at the Dallas Cowboys. That should be juicy. I know things don't always work out, but that should be massive. I think Derrick Henry has a huge bounce back against the Bears. Scatterboo is just so reliable on the ground through the air. Breece Hall, I want to get a little unique with my lineup. I don't think many people are high on Breece Hall, but he faces the Bengals this week. I love that matchup. Odunze should bounce back against the Ravens, and Egbuka with no Mike Evans should be a solid play in week 8. You can create your own lineup simply by downloading the FastDraft app. Use my promo code LAND. I'll match your deposit up to $50, and then you'll get my week 8 rankings completely free. You can check that out in the pinned comment if you want to have some fun. Okay, last game of the week, the Commanders at the Chiefs. 48.5 point over under. The Chiefs are favored by 9.5 points. Obviously, that line gets bigger if Jaden Daniels is going to play or if he doesn't, right? Here's the good news for Jaden Daniels. The MRI showed no long-term issues, but they haven't, at the time of me recording this video, officially ruled Jaden Daniels out or decided that he's going to play. Now, here's the deal. I am ranking this as if Jaden Daniels is playing. Okay, if Jaden Daniels is out there, then Bill Krosky-Merritt is getting enough of the work there in Washington. I know, again, it wasn't what we wanted it to be on Sunday. There's a reason Bill Krosky is not a must start for me, but there's still plenty of opportunities for him to convert in the right game, right? Here on Sunday, he had 33 snaps, had 14 total opportunities. That is like 3-4 weeks in a row where he's had over 10 opportunities, where he's led the backfield. The issue with Bill Krosky-Merritt right now, if we're being completely unbiased, is number one, there is no threat down the field for the Washington Commanders, okay? With last week, no Terry, no Debo, no Noah Brown, there wasn't a single moment where the Cowboys felt threatened down the field. And what teams are doing against the Commanders, they know they have a good run game, so they are stacking the box. If you go back and you watch the Commanders versus the Cowboys last week, even before Jaden Daniels went down with an injury, every single time JCM touched the ball, there was someone in his face. The offensive line was not doing their job, but to be fair, they were overwhelmed every single time they were running the ball simply because there was no threat over the top. So it's my belief that until Terry and Debo and Noah Brown and Jaden Daniels are all healthy and ready to go, then there will be a lot of disappointing games from Bill Krosky-Merritt. But when we see a healthy Jaden, all of those wide receivers back, defenses will not be able to stack the box. There will be the threat on the ground from Jaden Daniels, the threat in the air through Jaden Daniels, and it will be a much more balanced attack. But look, there are worse plays than playing the starter for the Washington Commanders. Now, on the opposite side of the ball, Isaiah Pacheco is actually starting to really carve out a nice role for himself. It's great to see if you were a Pacheco believer before the season. Here in this most recent game, and we have to keep in mind that Isaiah Pacheco did go down with an injury, but in this most recent game, Isaiah Pacheco had 45 snaps, just 15 for Kareem Hunt. Rashard Smith had a role as well. 17 total opportunities, and obviously he got into the end zone, 12.4 fantasy points. I do think Rashard Smith is going to continue to be a problem for Isaiah Pacheco, specifically as a pass catching threat, but obviously the Raiders didn't score a single point last week, so they could feature Rashard Smith towards the end of the game. Pacheco is a playable name, and I would be shocked if the Chiefs don't completely dismantle the Commanders here on Monday Night Football. But guys, I appreciate you watching the video. Do me a favor, hit the like button and show some love. Subscribe if you like the content, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Nothing but love. Draft with me every night this week on the FastDraft app, where there are thousands of dollars to be won weekly. Getting started is easy. Download the FastDraft app, use the promo code LAND at sign up to get your deposit match up to $50. That's up to 10 free entries on us. And when you finish your first DFS contest, I'll send you my weekly rankings completely free. Check out the link in the pinned comment to start drafting today.